The Nightmare Before Christmas is really just one big joy to sit down and listen to. As I spoke about at length in my original review of the movie, which you can find a link in the description to, Danny Elfman really outdid himself with the scoring of this movie, making a soundtrack that both perfectly encapsulates a story about Halloween and Christmas, as well as form the basis for perhaps one of the best animated musicals of all time. And considering some of its competition in that regard, you know that's saying something. But that being said, considering there's a total of 10 songs in the film, and that there's not a single bad one among them, it's only logical that some would end up talked more about than others. And today, I'd like to focus on one song that doesn't get quite as much attention, specifically Jack's Obsession, and go over why it might just be the most understated, though not underrated, songs in the movie. And obviously, if you've never seen The Nightmare Before Christmas but plan to, consider this your spoiler warning. Okay. So as I just said, all the songs in The Nightmare Before Christmas are good and have most definitely gotten their due credit. That I won't even try and deny. But while most of the songs have been examined and talked about at length, Jack's Obsession tends to be less so in this regard. And at first glance, it's pretty obvious why that is, since while still a great song and doing its intended job perfectly, it is a little simple in nature, and not to mention relies more on in-story context to make complete sense. And on the surface, it's simply the culmination of Jack's attempts at finding the true meaning of Christmas through science ending in failure, and him coming to the conclusion that he should try to improve Christmas rather than understand it. And all of that is most definitely true. However, there is also a lot more to it than that. Because first of all, it's this song that changes the entire course of the movie. Up until that point in the story, Jack had only wanted to try and understand and be able to explain what Christmas actually was to everybody else, and his fascination with the holiday mostly stopped there. But by the time that song begins, we see that his fruitless attempts to get a grasp on the holiday have led him to become obsessed with finding an answer, as the title aptly demonstrates. And the more dead ends he hits, the more he becomes determined to overcome them, until he finally has his quote-unquote epiphany. And what's particularly brilliant about it was that Zero had given him the picture to try and cheer him up. You can clearly see that he's worried for his master and knows that his obsessiveness will only lead to ruin. So he tries to make him feel better by reminding him that he doesn't need to understand Christmas, because he's all he'll ever need to be, the one and only Pumpkin King. But since Jack is so obsessed with Christmas by that point, he takes something a little different away from Zero's message, which is that the only way for him to truly understand Christmas is for him to experience it firsthand, and in the role of Santa Claus himself, no less. And with that, the movie then transitions into its iconic second half, where Halloween Town takes over Christmas and everyone tries to remake it in their own image, to disastrous consequences. And once again, all of this is the culmination of Jack's obsession, both literally and song-wise. Again, this song's title really tells you everything you need to know about Jack's current mindset. But the point is, it's this song where Jack becomes obsessed with the idea of actually taking over Christmas and getting to experience a whole different holiday. And while it does lead to disaster, it does also lead him to regaining his love of Halloween and his true purpose in life. So I guess Zero did still accomplish what he was trying to in the long run. It's just a shame that had to involve him literally being blown out of the sky, though. But another interesting thing about Jack's obsession is that some have argued that it's the closest Jack gets to having a villain song. Because when you really look at it, this song has pretty much all the hallmarks of the classic scene where the villain finally gives in to madness and succumbs to evil. We see Jack become so consumed by Christmas that it drives him to do something irrational, with his actions towards the end even coming across as slightly unhinged, and even finishes the song with an evil laugh and proclaims somewhat ominously, "This year, Christmas will be ours!" Though, of course, given the context involved, it's impossible to actually view Jack as the villain in this scenario. Because as I went over in another video, which you can also find a link in the description to, even with his more questionable actions, the movie still does a perfect job of keeping Jack in a sympathetic light. And that mainly comes down to the fact that he never intended to cause all the damage he does. Even when he plans on taking over Christmas, he still genuinely believes he's doing a good thing, even beyond getting over his crisis, and has absolutely no malicious intent behind his actions. Even at the end of the song, as I just pointed out, he's simply happy because he thinks he solved his dilemma, and laughs evilly because, as the natural ruler of Halloween, that's just simply the way he laughs. So him coming across in an almost villainous light in this scene is a lot more about it being extremely obvious to the viewer that Jack is setting himself up for a terrible fall, and he's way too ecstatic to notice the obvious. Though, fortunately, in the end he's able to see the truth before he's done too much damage, which is why he firmly remains a good person throughout. He never meant any actual harm with his actions, and once he realizes what he's doing, he stops and tries to set things right. But even beyond its unique properties as a song and the role it fills in the story, it's also notable simply for how well it captures the feeling of being utterly obsessed with something. I mean, we've all been completely consumed, taken in, or otherwise obsessed with something at some point in our lives, and this song is able to perfectly put into words and music what that feeling is like, especially when totally engrossed with something you don't completely understand, just as Jack is here. It's a gnawing feeling of searching for answers that may or may not exist, and as you become more and more consumed by it, you just want as much of it as you can possibly get. And if you're not careful, it just might lead you to do something you'll regret. Really. As I've already said a few times, this song's title may be simple, but it's a dead accurate one. So in the end, Jack's obsession is really just like every other song in The Nightmare Before Christmas, in that it perfectly conveys exactly what it needs to, progresses the story along in an important way, and helps the audience understand the mindset of the person singing it, in this case being Jack. Now, as I said at the start, I'm not trying to argue that Jack's Obsession is actually the best song in the movie, or that it's underrated or anything like that. Simply that it's not as talked about or analyzed as the other songs are. And one has to admit that's a bit strange, considering how pivotal it really is to the plot. But either way, it doesn't really matter since it's only one of many different components that helped make The Nightmare Before Christmas the beloved classic that it is today. as well as shows just how well thought out the writing behind all the songs really were. Okay, I think I've gone on about this for long enough. So now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Do you believe that Jack's Obsession might just be the most understated song in The Nightmare Before Christmas? Or do you believe it doesn't have to be dissected and overly analyzed to still be a great song that does its intended job perfectly? Please let me know in the comments below. And as I always say, you do not have to agree with this video just because you watched it. You can feel about Jack's Obsession and any other song in The Nightmare Before Christmas that you want to, and if you disagree with everything I said, that's perfectly okay. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.